Have you heard about the king who allegedly ate himself to death? In early 1771, on what is referred to in Sweden as Fat Tuesday, King Adolf Frederick consumed his final meal before Lent. It apparently consisted of sauerkraut, meat with turnips, lobster, caviar, duckling, champagne wine, and a traditional Swedish pastry known then as hettvig. Internet folklore insists that King Frederick not only had one or two of these rolls, but 14. Except, there's really no proof of this. The poet and diplomat who wrote about the king's meal did so 1 month after the king's death, and he wasn't even an eyewitness to the feast. Furthermore, historical records show that the king died from a stroke hours after his meal, and he had been in delicate health for a long time before that. It's more likely that his death was long pending, not fueled by a one-time gorge of pastries. But who cares? It's a fun, chaotic fib. The internet loves fun, chaotic fibs. Even to this day. In early June, a TikTok user posted a video reacting to someone eating a quote-unquote gluttonous meal, on par with King Frederick's.
She just posted her using cookie dough as like a spoon with Chipotle. I think I think that as gluttonous as. Ooh.
Except what the user is describing never happened. When the comments pointed this out, the user simply admitted, "I didn't watch the full video, not gonna lie." Whether it be 1771 or 2025, humanity is fascinated by food spectacles. Premature death by eating haunts us, so much so that we're willing to embellish and circulate myths to justify our fears. The video that TikTok user was referring to is called a mukbang, and it's been getting the King Frederick treatment for over a year now. Mukbang is a blend of the Korean words muknan and bangsong, and roughly translates to a broadcast where people eat. The mukbang became popular in the late 2000s, facilitated by the South Korean media site Africa TV. In the mid-2010s, the mukbang traveled west. Popular influencers like Trisha Paytas and Nikocado Avocado, yes, that one, became the face of American eating shows. Soon, everyone was doing it, from celebrities to regular netizens. But the 2020s has seen a major shift. No longer are mukbangs monumentalized in the media or quirkily accepted by foodie laymen. Accusations of gluttony, poor health, food waste, and fetish content permeate the net. Today, I'll take you through a brief tour of the genre, and I will not be covering rage baiters, because I don't want to, but instead, I'll explain the basic elements of the niche. Then we'll look at the health panic it has stirred, the desirability politics it has unearthed, and the conservatism hiding beneath the whole damn thing. Mukbangs are going down in internet infamy. As Marie Antoinette famously did not say, "Let them eat cake." Looks like we've got a mystery in our hands, gang. No, not the mukbangs. I mean, what's in this box? This video is sponsored by ThredUp, an online consignment and thrift store. I've always been a secondhand shopper, whether that be from local stores or online platforms. I love the affordability of it, and I love giving a new home to old clothes. I've been using ThredUp since 2021 when I was just a baby YouTuber. Their platform has high quality items and even items that are new with tags. Like these Calvin Klein Hills I got for 53% off estimated retail value. ThredUp's improved search makes scavenging for my needs all the more easy. I wanted some pieces that reflect the style of internet infamy, and so I just typed in dark academia into their search bar. With their search, you can further refine by color, condition, and material to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. This skirt is peak 2014 Tumblr. It's by the brand Coco, and it's estimated to retail for $57, but I got it for $17.59. To drive home the paranoid academic thing, I paired it with this top from Onia. It's estimated to retail for $125, but I got it from ThredUp for only $23.09. This cardigan is from the brand Talbots. It's estimated to retail for $100, but I got it for $15.39. Now, nothing I'm wearing right now has pockets, which is inconvenient for all the espionage work that I obviously very clearly truthfully do. I found this New York Metropolitan Museum of Art purse that has a little shoe print on it. It's kind of cute. It's the perfect size for my tape recorder. And a hammer. It's estimated to retail for $159, but I got it for $27. You can shop hundreds of brands for the fraction of the price, all in one place. Tap my link and use code SHANSPEAR50 to shop my ThredUp faves and receive 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Thank you to ThredUp for sponsoring this segment, and thank you for watching. Now, back to the infamy. As lawless as mukbangs seem, they actually follow a set of performance rules. They're usually hosted by one person, known as the mukbanger or broadcast jockey, who sits before a sprawling meal. Sometimes it's home cooked, sometimes it's takeout. The size of this meal is often distorted by the camera angle. The food is placed closer to the lens while the mukbanger sits further away. Size matters here, and the size of these meals have become a massive source criticism. There's probably a method to the madness. The bigger the food, the more excessive it feels. And excessiveness is one characteristic that makes food content so popular, especially food porn, which is arguably a characteristic of mukbangs and is meant to be aspirational. Simultaneously, mukbangs are supposed to be communal. Eating culture in South Korea is said to be community-based. You eat at the same table as your meal partners, and you each pull from the same set of dishes. There's usually a main dish surrounded by a bunch of side dishes called banchan. This seems to be the formula for mukbangs. They're digitized dinner tables that are meant to replicate the familiar tradition of community eating. In fact, mukbangs seem to have gained popularity alongside the rise in single-person households in South Korea. As more people, especially younger people, began to live alone, they may have turned to the internet, and more specifically to mukbangs, as an eating companion. In this way, the camera is the stand-in for the viewer. You're looking across a full table at your eating partner, the mukbanger. The food is just as much yours as it is theirs. That may be one reason why there's so much of it. Even in US American mukbangs, they display multiple servings of the same food, or they eat community foods like pizza. Even when a mukbanger is eating a single serving, they still let you have that first figurative bite. Obviously, this is a very romanticized spin of the genre. The viewer isn't actually eating the food, and most mukbangers are not eating 14 burgers and 50 fries. While some mukbangers treat their videos like eating challenges, similar to pie eating or glizzy gobbling competitions, many more mukbangers save extra food for later, or they share it with people they know. In extreme cases, the mukbanger might push themselves to finish, or they spit out food between takes. Not exactly ethical. But I would argue that figuratively sharing the food with the viewer is the main point of the mukbang. Cho argues that mukbangs are about collaboration. It's not just the eater's own personal mealtime, but rather it is open to public viewership to satisfy a viewer's vicarious pleasure of eating. There's a symbiotic relationship between the mukbanger and the viewer, where both parties eat together, even if one party is pretending to eat while the other actually does. On live streams, mukbangers can even take direction from their audience. They oblige when a viewer asks them to eat a specific dish or to show a close-up of their food. Mukbangs are so collaborative in nature, in fact, that even its current hate campaign depends on group effort. If a mukbanger posts an outrageous video and no one is around to react to it, did it even happen? There's a popular saying among anti-mukbang propagandists. When they see food that's excessive or caloric, they might say, This is the gluttony they spoke about in the Bible. Gluttony is a capital vice, arguably the first ever sin recorded. If not by Eve's biting of the apple, then at least by gluttony's placement on Ponticus's list of chief sins. Gluttony seems to have always had a religious tilt to it, especially in regards to food. In the 1830s, Reverend Sylvester Graham, of graham cracker fame, actually led a religious crusade against gluttony and sexual excess. He spoke about the importance of bland foods, and he was adamant about keeping food pure. He was such an anti-freak, actually, that it kind of made him a freak by proxy. He thought that eating a very strict, dull diet would deter bad thoughts, which in turn would help people fight the evil urge to, masturbate. You ever see a food so delicious it gets you rock solid in under a second? He has. Despite gluttony being the most boring sin of them all, lacking the sexiness of lust and the strategy of materialism, it's still the most feared, precisely because of the perceived power that gluttony has over the body. William Miller describes gluttony as vulgar and lowbrow, self-indulgent in a swinish way. While gluttony is a faceless criminal, media depiction often links it to fatness. In this 1904 etching, James Ensor depicts two gluttons eating everything in sight: a severed head, a lobster carried in by death itself, and a pig. These two gluttons are so eager to keep eating, despite actively vomiting from overindulgence. The larger one takes center stage in this etching. Our eyes are easily drawn to him, while everything else, including death, the thinner glutton, even the food, melts into the background. The gluttony portrayed in this image is such a horrific sin that it causes or even deserves death. There are more familiar depictions of gluttony out there. Think of the evil, greedy capitalist and how in artistic depictions his skin is a pink, piggish color, just as Miller described, and his body is swollen by indulgence and exploitation. Or think of the big back trend on TikTok, and how greed is visually linked to rising weight. Miller argues that
the sin of gluttony is the sin of fat. It is the sin of ugliness and ill health. Its wages, we are told, is death. Physical, moral, and social. Although not all gluttony leads to obesity, nor is all obesity the consequence of the voluntary indulgence in the vice of gluttony, we anti-gluttonous moralists are never quite willing to pardon fat.
One of the loudest criticisms against mukbangs is that it facilitates gluttony. And because gluttony does not exist separate from the image of fatness, a large portion of anti-mukbang propaganda centers on the perils of a growing body. I've noticed a difference in how fat mukbangers are received on the internet versus skinny mukbangers. And this difference gets replicated the more you travel identity lines, say race, perceived class, Eurocentric attractiveness, etc. Fat mukbangers get it bad. Women get it worse. Black women? Oh brother. Anti-mukbang moralists are aware of the double standard present in their hate campaigns. They gladly accept it. On numerous occasions, I've seen someone point out how fat creators are treated more violently than skinny creators, only to receive an interesting response from anti-mukbang moralists. Skinny people do things to stay skinny, one person argues, meaning skinny people aren't bullied about gluttony or health simply because they aren't fat. Even if they're eating the same thing, even if they're eating it in the same quantity and at the same speed. I saw another comment that I forgot to screenshot and now I'm kind of beating myself up about, but it compared fatness to cancer, stating that if a cancer patient was smoking cigarettes and a person without cancer was smoking cigarettes, you, it's not me, you would be more inclined to tell the cancer patient to quit smoking because, well, they're the ones with cancer. The analogy here being that fat people shouldn't eat unhealthy or in copious amounts because they're sick, while a skinny person can get away with it because they aren't sick. The logic here is so unsound that it's shaking like a stripper. But first things first, you shouldn't be cruel to anyone, whether you deem them unhealthy or not. That's a human person. Second, You can't determine someone's health by just looking at their weight. Skinniness is not a signifier of health. We know this by now. It is not an absence of illness. You can be skinny and have cancer from smoking cigarettes. You could be skinny and have high blood pressure. You can be skinny and have high cholesterol. You can be skinny and be at major risk of heart disease. And you can be skinny and have a stroke. These are all health concerns that people deride fat people for, but ignore when it comes to skinny people, which is not only hypocritical, but it's also just dangerous. Anti-mukbang moralists believe that they are crusading against ill health. Except with arguments like these, health is the least of their concern. Since anti-mukbang moralists are so preoccupied with health, why don't we talk about it? I asked my newsletter subscribers, what does it mean to be healthy? To which I received varied responses. Health is subjective. Health is physical, mental, and spiritual satisfaction. Health is complicated. Nutritional eating was brought up quite a bit, and exercise was on the docket every now and then, but the answers largely varied based on ability and access. Professional definitions are a little bit more vague. The World Health Organization, for instance, defines health as the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. What about society's definition of health? Every time I look up nutritional recipes or search for guided workouts, I'm blasted by the same narrow rhetoric. I lost 39,000 pounds by eating this one simple meal. Here are my favorite healthy meals as someone who lost. I don't fit any of my big, huge, gargantuan clothes anymore, and that's because I ate. Are you big? Well, stop. Do this instead. It's rare to come across content that is health-centered, that actually tries to educate you on nutrition or the importance of movement. At least not content that's separate from weight loss. Health to broader society has become synonymous with thinness. We often can't talk about one without evoking the other. Therefore, when faced with the nebulous phrase, be healthy, the average person's first thought is, whatever you do, don't become fat. Ideal body type has fluctuated throughout history, based on economic or racial tensions. But society today believes in weight-centric health, where thin is in and fat people are drug out back like Old Yeller. Our culture is, as Deshaun Harrison describes, under a politic of thinness. This politic was especially ramped up in the 90s and 2000s, alongside the rise of the so-called obesity epidemic. I've seen quite a few anti-mukbang videos use the term obesity, arguing that being obese is dangerous. A lot of those videos tend to replicate the language and violence of the so-called obesity epidemic. In 2005, the US Surgeon General declared that obesity was a threat on par with terrorism, not only to the person who is obese, but to the nation. Mind you, the context. This was the era of the so-called war on terror. 9/11 happened just a few years prior, and sizable portions of the US American public were antagonistic to everything and everyone they deemed terroristic. So this statement feels like a calculated call for bloodshed, and we have treated fatness with careful annihilation ever since. The obesity epidemic is contentious among scholars, laymen, and even some medical professionals. Part of the reason is the language. The classification of obesity as a disease is wishy-washy. Some refer to it as a chronic disease needing medical intervention, but others say that it's a personal choice based on diet and lifestyle. Others still argue that obesity raises the risks of disease, such as heart disease or cancer. But does that mean it's a disease itself? And what's the difference between causation and raised risk? Natalie Boero argues that obesity was actually medicalized, especially after World War II. Furthermore, groups like the AOA lobby to have obesity taken seriously by the government as a quote-unquote serious disease. Boero considers obesity to be a postmodern epidemic, meaning it lacks a pathological basis, yet it's often medicalized. Postmodern epidemics, quote, incorporate elements of moral panics, end quote, wherein a phenomenon, occurrence, individual, or group of people come to be seen as a threat to social values and interests. The obesity epidemic essentially became a witch hunt for fat people, with their existence being seen not only as a threat to themselves, but to finances and public health as a whole. Obesity has been considered a public health risk since at least the early 1900s, and some argue that the obesity epidemic as we know it today began in the 1980s. But two scholars, Boero and Sabrina Strings, argues that the late 90s were transformative for the so-called epidemic. It was in 1999 that the qualifying BMI for overweight changed, going from 27.8 for men and 27 for women to now 25 for everyone. The obesity category also lowered its threshold to 30 and higher. Scholars argue that this sudden standardization dramatically increased the numbers of overweight and obese people, with more than 30 million additional people being considered overweight practically overnight. The use of BMI as an indicator of health and obesity is also contested. BMI does not measure body fat. It measures the relationship between height and weight, which is also influenced by other things like bone density and muscle mass. The BMI index was created in the 1830s by Adolphe Quetelet, a Belgian astronomer and mathematician, not a health professional. He didn't plan to use the index as a determiner of health, but instead he wanted to measure averages. He wanted to apply the laws of mathematical possibility to humans and find the ideal average man. Quetelet used the BMI index to measure white, middle-class men, not the population at large. And bless his heart, he could not help but be weird about it.
In his work, Quetelet explicitly and arbitrarily linked the average man to beauty, health, and moral goodness, while associating vice, illness, and ugliness with persons who deviated from the mean.
Quetelet's work was so freaky, in fact, that other freaks saw it and was like... Bailey et al. Argue that Charles Darwin's weird cousin, Francis Galton, quote, fully embraced, extensively cited, and enthusiastically applied Quetelet's work. To what, you might ask? Well, Francis Galton formulated the modern eugenics movement.
He dreamed of improving the human race by controlling human reproduction so that only the healthiest and most intelligent would carry the white race forward.
All of this seems like it would have implications for how we test and understand obesity today. But we use these systems, despite their association with racial, class, and gender supremacy, without much criticism. I wonder why. The war on obesity and anti-fat rhetoric as a whole has severe anti-Black and misogynistic undertones. Boero argues that the obesity epidemic routinely targets ethnic cultures, problematizing ethnic people and the foods they cultivate, while standardizing healthy food as something prepared in a white American nuclear family. Sabrina Strings argues that misogynoir has impacted discussions of health throughout human history. Black women have been historically depicted as insatiable gluttons, both sexually and food-related. Because of their supposed instability, Black women have been seen as threats to public health, from syphilis outbreaks to TB, and even obesity. This misogynoristic language is replicated today in anti-mukbang discourse, especially as Black women seem to be bullied the most on social media and are the most scapegoated in conversations of health. There's also a class aspect to anti-fat rhetoric. There was a time when being plump was the ideal standard, mainly because it meant you were wealthy enough to afford food. When thinness became the ideal in the mid-1800s, it was because slim waists were the luxury of a social class that did not have to live on a heavy starch diet. Fatness, as a result, quickly became associated with poverty and was thusly demonized. And we continue to see this rhetoric today. I don't know if you guys were tuned into the statue that was in New York of the Black woman Because of her weight and the things she was wearing and her hair and the fact that she was a black woman, people kept insinuating that she was poor or lower class and kept pulling out these classist and misogynistic insults against her. Boero states,
cultural assumptions about fat people, about what they eat, their emotional state, their lack of willpower, their laziness, and so on, serve as a powerful medium for the social acceptance of obesity as an epidemic. These cultural assumptions about fat people intersect with norms of gender, race, class, and sexuality. What we know about fat people is informed by what we know about minorities, women, and poor people.
On one hand, we treat weight gain as a contagious disease. It's inevitable, something that can and will happen to everyone, lest they maintain a restrictive diet and punitive exercise regime. But we also consider weight gain and ill health a personal choice. That's not really the case, though. It's an illusion of choice that we have between predatory marketing on the part of fast food and junk food, class oppression, food oppression, including food deserts, real or perceived time scarcity resulting in less opportunity to make nutritional meals, and government subsidies that favor ultra-processed foods. A lot of people struggle to make healthier choices. We also have to consider the fact that people live with eating disorders and food noise. They may experience something that causes them to gain weight or make it harder for them to lose weight, such as chronic illnesses, medications, and hormonal conditions. Weight is also genetic. I can go on, but none of this should really matter. Even if none of that was a factor, being fat is not a moral failing. It's not a lifelong sentence to be bullied, abused, or ostracized from society. I don't think the people who harp about health and diet online actually care about those things. If we cared about health, we would consider the variety of ways in which health and nutrition are impacted outside of diet and exercise, especially the systems that impact it. We would challenge narratives that dictate that health is only achievable for able-bodied, middle to upper class, thin people. We would recognize that participating in relentless dogpiling and internet bullying negatively impacts mental and physical health. And we would also stop painting health as some kind of punishment, something that we have to weaponize against our bodies and other people's bodies for the sake of skinniness. We would allow exercise to be fun and enjoyable. Nutrition would be accessible, and yo-yo dieting and media glamorized starvation would be beat to death with hammers. Anti-mukbang sentiment is really a continuation of the moral panic we've been enduring for decades. It's a moral panic about weight, not health. It's not a coincidence that anti-mukbang propaganda has found traction alongside the rise of fat-phobic internet trends, such as Big Back. The culture of the internet, like pop culture as a whole, has been shifting back towards ultra-thinness for some time now. Girl, if we ever left. The rise of wellness fads, the proliferation of diet culture, the cesspool that is skinny talk, all of it brews within a wider trend of fat phobia. And now with terms like Big Back, it seems like netizens have been granted new language to describe the burgeoning fear that they have: gaining weight, eating food, and being fat. The term Big Back and its various iterations have existed for a while. In the Black community, I've seen it used primarily in reference to having a big butt, baby got back, and all that jazz. According to the Internet Bible, aka Urban Dictionary, this seems to be the prevailing definition. The term Big Back only started including body weight in its definition in recent years. This 2023 entry, for instance, states that having a big back means that someone's back is overly large. The accompanying sentence is, James eats a lot, so we call him Big Back. The same goes for this 2024 entry, Big Back Bison Disorder, and this 2025 entry, which includes the sentence, we're all looking at you, fatty. The big back trend on TikTok is relatively new. In March of 2024, a user posted this video. It expresses the agony and despair of knowing that your sister, your twin, has a huge ass back. A few days later, the user Jada Wada posted a video of her baby with some sort of stuffing in its onesie. The caption reads, "My daughter's back when all the milk catches up to her." That same month, Sin Comedy posted a parody video of Dora the Explorer's backpack song, spinning it to say "big back" instead.
Big back, yeah!
Backs worldwide were never the same. Look, I know how to take a joke, okay? I'm something of a self-deprecator myself.
I actually do cuss a little.
I'm aware that calling the trend fat-phobic is highly controversial, only because those who participate within it say that it's just for funsies. When I published my newsletter for this video, I got a response from a subscriber who was confused about the term. They weren't sure if it was inherently discriminatory. They had seen a video of someone condemning the big back trend only to open the comments and be met with dismissal. Some of those comments read, "I knew it was only a matter of time before someone posted a think piece about big back activities. Make AAVE black again." Black people crafted the term. It's a term of endearment. Big back is a persona, a lifestyle, a mindset. My personal mantra, if you will. It's really not about physical appearance. I hope this helps. Big back is a mindset. The pillow's just exaggerated to make it funnier. If you're happy with yourself, it shouldn't matter. If you're not, then unbig your back. Simple. These comments made me a bit disappointed. Also, someone's mowing their grass. I'm sorry if you can hear that. Big back is AAVE. We already covered that. But just because the term is AAVE doesn't mean the context surrounding the term isn't weight-related or fat-phobic. I will say that I don't think most people are thinking about the implications of the word or the trend, and are most likely using it not to be malicious, per se. But I do think the trend itself is inherently size-related, and it pulls from fat-phobic narratives. The comedic who made the big back song, Sin Comedy, noted that he made it to taunt and insult himself into maintaining his weight loss journey.
I was beginning my health journey of taking my weight loss more seriously and making healthier food choices. So it was really a taunt or an insult to myself as a way to stay on track.
The wider trend on TikTok requires people to stuff their clothes with pillows to emulate having more body fat. There are TikToks where people talk about unbigging their back, which means to lose weight. In videos where fat people jokingly say that skinny people are stuffing their clothes to look like them, the comments agree, calling fat people the OG big backs. And yes, sometimes people do post big back videos without stuffing their shirts. Good for them. You could argue then that big back jokes are more about being greedy or gluttonous than it is about fatness. The issue with that, as we have seen, is that gluttony has been forcibly linked to fatness across our culture. The trend continues to make that connection by depicting fat people as gluttons. It continues to position fatness as a spectacle to make fun of or to hate. And it's really no different from the 1904 etching by James Ensor. The big back trend has become inseparable from anti-mukbang sentiment. When a creator eats something deemed excessive or unhealthy, whatever those words mean, netizens comment on the state of that person's engorging back. Despite what the naysayers were naysaying earlier, the term big back in these contexts are not endearing. It's not just a mindset separated from the body. Being called a big back, especially as a mukbang creator, is usually paired with insults against one's weight. People think you are fat, and they are making fun of you for it. What's endearing about being told you have a big back bison disorder by a total stranger on the internet? What's endearing about being told that you need chin, cheek, and arm liposuction? What's endearing about comparing a black woman to BBL Donkey Kong? Hello? Do you understand how bizarre that is? Over 8,000 people keying over a comment comparing a black woman to a fat gorilla. I am getting the hammers ready. Sure, picking on each other in the black community is a form of endearment and a display of love, I guess. I personally never liked that. It's like when you see a hideous animal in a book and you tell your sibling that it looks a lot like them, right? But there are levels to it. Being in community with someone doesn't absolve you of hurting their feelings or making them feel unvalued. Also, being on the same app as someone doesn't make you in community with them. I'm on the same app as Mr. Beast, and given the chance, I would put a bounty out on his head. You don't know people's intention through a screen. If a random stranger walked up to you on the street and called you a big back BBL bison gorilla, would that be endearing to you, or would that be cause for you to grab that person by their lips and ball their face up like a piece of paper? I just want to know. Let's go back for a moment to this comment. If you're happy with yourself, the big back jokes shouldn't matter. If you're not happy with yourself, then unbig your back. Simple. This comment implies that people who oppose the big back jokes are simply insecure, and that insecurity is their burden to carry. It's individualizing something that's potentially more systemic than that. I was reading this book by Deshaun Harrison titled Belly of the Beast: The Politics of Anti-Fatness and Anti-Blackness. And in it, Harrison argues that insecurities aren't just personal, they're political. Insecurities are a response to the violences ugly people are forced to endure. Insecurities are not a personal indictment, they are an indictment of the world. So if people are insecure about the big back trend, and if they are insecure about the language disseminated in anti-mukbang propaganda, what does their insecurity say about the world at large?
I am a trans man, and I see a lot of fear-mongering about testosterone online. And one of the most common fear-mongering points is that you will become fat. The implication is that you will become ugly because you are now fat.
I do think that fat phobia, like other forms of bigotry, seems to be getting more normalized on the internet, especially thanks to the anonymity afforded by the comment section. As someone who's been struggling with body image issues for years, it's truly appalling to see. The internet has taught a lot of people that cruelty is funny, or simply not a big deal. So commenters are way too comfortable to type out their own words, leaving behind only empathy for the person who's behind the screen. If they are even conscious, the person they're talking about is a person. Still, some commenters try to disguise their blatant fat phobia by claiming they're trying to be helpful. They're not bullying, they're simply concerned about the person's health, even if the other person never asks for any health advice. Oftentimes, they don't stop their negative comments, even after being told the person is doing things that are considered healthy or eating nutritiously balanced meals. It's simply never enough. The only good thing a fat or overweight person can do in their eyes is immediately stop being fat or overweight. They don't care about any sort of journey. It's clear they just don't like fat people.
It's easy for me to laugh off being called big-backed, because I have labored for years to heal my internalized fat phobia and have come to a place of acceptance with my fatness. My body is the way it is, and any words wielded at it won't change it. But only through privilege and circumstances was I able to do that work. I had none of these tools when I was just a kid being called a fat ass on the playground, or being told I needed to lose weight by family or the pediatrician or TV ads or magazines in the checkout stand. I spent decades brutalizing myself with internal torment and disordered eating, a way of life that remains the natural option, read the programmed option, and will continue to remain for generations of young people if the othering of body shapes persists. It is always disheartening to see the oppressive tactics of patriarchy reincarnate. On the flip side, I also believe that the body positive and body neutral progress we have made this far hasn't been for nothing. We just keep going.
Another major critique of the mukbang is that it is inherently fetishistic. People believe that the sauce and the noise and the food types are chosen to arouse the viewer, which is super funny because, are you hard right now? That's what it sounds like. It sounds like you watched a mukbang and you felt a little tingly inside, kind of like Reverend Sylvester Graham. A large portion of mukbangs are not fetishistic. Making noises while conducting a mukbang, while I can see how off-putting it could be, is actually integral to the format. Visual and auditory cues, such as nodding or humming, help the viewer connect with the food, and It helps the viewer make inferences about its taste. Think of it like an immersion tactic. Mukbang viewers are looking at something they can't, and most likely won't, taste for themselves. It's the job of the mukbanger to make it appealing and accessible. As for the sauce, girl, I don't know. Sauce is a nightmare for me. Like, I hate having an excess of sauce and I hate making a mess, but it could be satisfying or stimulating for other people. That doesn't mean it's inherently sexual though. That's like saying slime videos or those satisfying compilation videos are fetishes. No one else but you is bricked up right now. In terms of mukbangs, creators are often accused of being feedies, which is a part of the feederism kink. Now, you know I'd do anything to find the truth, so I perused the feederism subreddit and a couple of feeder/weight fetish websites to try and find the supposed connection to mukbangs. All I have to say is, you better like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. You owe me. I'm not kink shaming, I just think that if you stumbled upon a video of someone vigorously fingering their own belly button on a random Tuesday afternoon when you thought you were just making a silly hee hee ha ha video about people eating on the internet, you too would be a little confused for a second. According to the feederism subreddit, which has over 71,000 members, feederism refers to a fantasy, often sexual, where the reality or the idea of weight gain leads to pleasure. Gainers and feedies enjoy gaining weight themselves, while encouragers and feeders enjoy the fantasy of helping someone else gain weight. While there are mukbang posts on this subreddit, there's not much. There's a few videos, some of which were deleted by the poster before I could view them, and more than anything, there's pictures. Pictures that reference eating or indulging more than showing it actually happen. The feeder mukbang videos I've seen on other websites are usually done naked or in revealing clothing. They're also filmed in such a way that the stomach and thighs are the main focal point. At least that's what I gathered from the previews, because a lot of this content obviously is behind paywalls. Contrastedly, regular mukbang videos on TikTok or YouTube are filmed fully clothed for obvious reasons, and are usually filmed from the chest up. Sometimes you don't even see the mukbanger's full body. This calls into question the validity of the fetish claims. Feeders aren't sexually stimulated by the food so much as they are sexually stimulated by the body ingesting the food. Mukbangs are centered on the food, whereas certified feeder content is centered on the body. The reaction to mukbang content on the feederism subreddit is also kind of tame. It seems like the users there prefer other avenues of pleasure. I saw more fervor under the belly button video than anything else on the site, okay? I also perused the general mukbang subreddit, and it was here that I actually found the most sexualized food content, which is kind of funny. There are users on this subreddit who post sexualized content and commentators who use feeder language, such as calling someone a fat piggy. But again, that's a very specific niche on the subreddit, and it's not indicative of the entire genre. Based on the volume of non-sexual posts versus the sexual posts, I would argue that most mukbang subredditors are not there for the fetish. Every sexual or sexually implied post I've come across has at least one user questioning their entire life underneath it. On other subreddits, primarily the Ask Me Anything subreddit or the Too Afraid to Ask subreddit, when feederism was brought up in connection to mukbangs, such as someone asking if feeders enjoy regular eating mukbangs, the response from the feeder community was usually no. Then again, I could only find a few of these posts, so the sample size is definitely too small to be definitive. Most of the posts I've seen calling mukbangs feeder fetish content are usually made by people who are not feeders or feedies themselves, who hate mukbangs, and who use that description as a way to shame creators and also viewers of mukbang content. That isn't to say that mukbangers can't make feeder fetish content, or even that they don't make feeder fetish content. It's hard to know for sure since there's so much plausible deniability. And I also simply don't care if they are. Like, who Who cares? There is one interesting similarity between feeders and mukbangers though. People who hate mukbangs and post about it online inadvertently use the same language as the feeders on kink forums. The only difference is tone and intention. Under a snark subreddit of a popular mukbang creator, one commenter stated, "Her stomach is officially bigger than her boobs." The goal of this comment was obviously to body shame that creator. However, this exact phrasing is used on kink forums. I saw two separate posts where a feedie seductively stated, "My belly is bigger than my boobs." The same similarities are found in accusations of greed and gluttony. This is an insult used by anti-mukbangers, but it's a sexually charged command on kink forums. The anti-mukbanger and the feeder, to a degree, are invested in the act of shaming and punishment, and arguably, both groups receive pleasure from doing it. An element central to anti-mukbang propaganda is the concept of law and punishment. Punishment and humiliation is seductive to them in the same way that it's seductive to an edgy conservative. While the kinkster is moralized as bad because of their subversive interests, anti-mukbangers are seen as good because they are crusading against a social and health-related evil: fatness. It seems that besides being fat, the worst thing you can do in front of an anti-mukbanger is be sexual. Sometimes it gives purity culture. What we label pornographic in part depends on our political, societal, and moral beliefs. The label sometimes has less to do with the content of a piece of work and more to do with who is viewing the content and what intentions or standards that person has. The label has also been historically weaponized against outgroups as a way to control or criminalize them. Who gets to decide what's filthy and who gets to decide who is filthy? How are fat people's status in a fatphobic society dependent upon them being seen as vulgar, excessive, and sexually immoral? Lots to think about. Whether mukbangs are fetishistic in terms of our traditional understandings of sex doesn't really interest me at this point. If someone wants to eat corn the long way, well, god damn it, they have the unalienable right to do so. I'm more interested in the idea of sexual desirability and social desirability present in mukbangs. Not only is the food meant to seduce our taste buds on par with past internet trends such as food porn, desirability in the mukbang is also size related, especially since mukbangs are seen as vehicles for fatness. Desirability and fatness are like water and oil in our society. They just don't mix. In fact, desiring or accepting fatness is automatically classified as a fetish. It's something aberrant and taboo in a fatphobic society. This may actually contribute to the feederism accusations, especially those levied against fat creators. The logic is that the only reason someone would willingly gain weight or show themselves gaining weight through the unapologetic consumption of food, or the reason someone would enjoy such content, is because it's fetishistic. The reason why desirability and fatness are so separated is because beauty standards, especially in the United States, are built on a mixture of anti-blackness and anti-fatness, among others. Like, you know this, we already talked about this like a million bajillion times. Deshaun Harrison argues that
people who are black, fat, disabled, and or trans more generally do not have access to beauty or desire capital.
In other words, not only are they sexually undesirable, they're socially undesirable. Desire depends on hierarchies of race, class, ability, and gender. If we go back to our discussions of health and how that's usually weaponized against fat and other marginalized people, we see that politics of desire and politics of health are violently intertwined. Who has been seen as historically unhealthy more than the black person, the fat person, the disabled person, and the trans person? And what past and present has our militant culture suggest that we do with so-called unhealthy people? We other them. We designate them as threats. We punish and eventually discard them. Being socially undesirable is terrifying. As Harrison notes,
the world has normalized the teachings that fat black people are not desirable, and thus,
fat and black bodies are deserving of the abuse they receive. Connecting health with identities and then allowing society to abuse or dispose of people deemed unhealthy or undesirable is a slippery, slippery slope. What's waiting for you at the bottom? It feels as though we got to fascism a little quick with this topic, but don't worry, we didn't take any detours. The clues were lying in wait from the beginning. The religious crusades, the moral appeals, the nearly seductive dedication to law and order, sexual anxiety, an us versus them narrative, the healthy versus the unhealthy, the good versus the fat. Eugenics, for crying out loud. That one was really obvious. Fat phobia is normalized in our culture, but it keeps strange bedfellows. With the acceleration of conservatism worldwide, it doesn't surprise me that we're dedicating ourselves to purity politics, reinforcing thinness, and popularizing anti-blackness. But what do we do, if at all? I'm not sure. Education is probably the most important tool here. Fat phobia and other discrimination is partially ignorance, partially power. There's a reason why politicians gloat about having an undereducated voting base. Reading the work of fat scholars, reading fat studies, listening to the lived experience of fat people has helped me to really mentally combat fat phobic rhetoric. I also try to critically engage with everything I see. You know this. I remind myself that the things that I believe in and the things that I want the world to experience are not punitive, not cruel, and not puritanical. I try to cultivate a non-disposable politic. I strengthen the muscle of hesitation. And it's hard. Not only because I still want to beat people with hammers, but because it's difficult, if at all possible, to educate yourself through oppression. There are things that slip through the cracks. Moments where I worry that I'm not thin enough or that my value diminishes the larger I grow. I do think that I am a fat person, and the people in my comments tell me regularly that I am. Does that mean that I'm not worthy of being alive? My education tells me that I'm worthy no matter what, but society tells me otherwise. So what do we do? I don't know. We can start, like I always say, by defending one another, looking out for one another, and trying to educate ourselves and other people. We target ignorance, and then we target power. For now, it's time to close out my tabs and clear my browsing history. This is Internet Infamy, and I am your host, Shakespeare. Thanks for watching. Per usual, before we go, I just wanted to give a shout out to my King Lear patrons. If you like this video, or if you like my content in general, and you're irresponsible with your money, please consider supporting my Patreon. You can find it linked below in the description. You can also check out ThredUp, where you can shop hundreds of brands for a fraction of the price, all in one place. Tap my link and use code Shakespeare50 to shop my ThredUp faves and receive 50% off your first order, plus free shipping. Thanks for watching. Bye!